Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na na na.
For the love, the inclusion, and the trust, we do this for the everyone's. We do this for the together, the unpopular, the unheard, the unmentioned. We do this for the scared, the different, the not us, the magnificent, unseen majesty, the house, the nerd in us all, the left of center, the crying, the mist, the them we will never forget, the sacrifice, the journey, the genius, the intelligentsia. We do this for the non-binary, the family, no matter how it looks. We do this for the unsung, the unhoused, the dream, the unbalanced, the scholar athlete, the academic excellence, the unfortunate, the misunderstood, the hood, the those not from the hood, the forgiveness, the self-healing, and the mental health, the balance, the body differently labeled, the body differently able, the genius of community. We do this for the brilliance of the heart, the light, the road less traveled, the folks of color, the folks not of color, the uncolored, the folks of color uncoloring themselves, the folks not of color coloring themselves, the fashion plates, those that can't fashion a plate, the godless and the ungodly, the blessed, those not feeling blessed, those giving blessings, those in the corner, those without a group, the insecure, the broken, the unbreakable, the fighting not to break, the silent, the bullied, the broken-hearted, the heartless, the all-heart, the hardened heart, the electronic, the panic at the disco, the Montero, the peace fly god, the neurodiverse, the Adele of Ghostface, the ghost faces of our beloved, the lonely, the now and later, the unrasa, the unbutu, the rally, the protest, the most disrespected on earth, the right thing, the healing, the hope, and the peace, the scholarship, the victory, the poetry, the uplifting, the resilient, the freedom, the liberation, the you are important, the when, the where, the why, the you. This is why we do this.
Now you see why you're here. I think by now you know who I am. I'm Tom Alpert. I'm the rabbi here at Temple Etz Chaim. It is wonderful for us all to be here and for me to welcome our other guests, our two panelists. Immediately to my right is Rabbi Elise Winick, who's going to moderate, and I'll let Elise say a little something about herself.
Sure. Well, I said that I'm here because of Jamil. We had an incredible run together at Brandeis when I was the Jewish chaplain and Jamil was the dean of students. And we had one particular powerful experience, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, which for me was kind of the ultimate in dialogue between communities. And my background is primarily working with college students and young adults. I've been an educator in the Boston Jewish community for about 30 years. And I'm really so honored to be invited to take part here and to try to lend something to the wise words that the men on either side of me have to share.
And to Elisa's right is the person she is here because of, Jamil Adams. Jamil, tell them a little something about you.
Pleasure to be here. I know I had to cut my hair off because people would get Elise and I confused. So, but I'm a Franklin resident and just love being part of the community and connecting with folks. And I've been in education for more than 30 years now. Started out in higher education and now in K through 12. I spend a lot of my time bringing folks together. I'm out in Scituate doing great things with our family out there, our Scituate family out there. And whenever the opportunity allows it and my schedule allows for it, I try to bring folks together in other places. I love poetry and art and use it as a vehicle to bring folks together. my better half, my energy, my wisdom. My wife, she is a lot to my power pack, so to speak. And so we just use that same energy to make that happen in our children. That's definitely, Elise and I go way back. We done been on some serious journeys. And Tom and I we go at least half a way back, so to speak, because we've been doing things with the Freedom Team.
Yeah, Jamil started the Franklin Freedom Team, which I'm sure we will get to discussing, and invited me to join. It's been an amazing experience, so I am thrilled about this conversation and looking forward to an important one. So Elise is going to moderate, which means she's going to tell us what to do.
It's a lot of power. So, Jamil can speak with greater depth to what inspired him for us to come together tonight for this purpose. But what he conveyed to me when he first reached out was that in the wake of rising anti-Semitism in the community, particularly following the events of October with Kanye West's posts on Instagram, Kyrie Irving's posting of a film clip that was problematic, and I actually heard that Kanye West was suspended from Instagram again a couple of days ago because of a song that references the first time he was. I didn't go into depth on what this one was, because it happened as I was trying to write. But we know from our experience together that that's not what it means for the Jewish community and communities of color to live together and to live with one another. And there's a tremendous feeling of helplessness when you see something happen on a broad scale. And two really terrible things happen when things happen on a broad scale. One is that you feel like you feel powerless. There's nothing you can do to change it because it is so big. And the other thing that happens is you lose sight of the fact that whoever the one bad actor is in a particular situation is not the entirety of a community. It's very easy to paint with broad strokes and lose sight of the fact that, I'll talk a little bit in a minute about Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a philosopher, a modern-day philosopher in the Jewish community. One of the most important things that I learned from Heschel was the idea that some are guilty, but all are responsible. So the question is, even when we are not the guilty parties, first of all, I think we have to look deep into our souls and say, maybe we're not the primary guilty party, but what are we doing in our lives that's helping this negativity to exist? It's there, and if I'm not actively engaged in trying to heal it, then I'm actually adding to the wound. But besides that, just because I'm not the one who did whatever was done doesn't mean that I don't have a responsibility to my community and to the world to achieve healing. And that's a very powerful sentiment, that idea that we're all responsible. And I'm not saying in a particular community we're all responsible for the misbehavior of members of our community. I'm saying we are all responsible. End of sentence. Anything that any of us can be doing to create healing is really essential. And when Jamil and I first started to talk about this event, there was kind of a struggle of, well, we're not changing the world, right? We're gonna, if we're lucky, we're gonna share that with a small group of people, live stream or not, it'll be a small group of people. But to recognize the ripple effect and the power that has, that when two of us sit down in conversation and we create something positive, that you can't hold the light back, right? The light has to shine out. And the more we are engaged in building that light together, the greater chance there is that it's gonna shine on everyone. So the backdrop, the difficulties that have been happening in terms of anti-Semitism that spurred this particular conversation. But let us also not delude ourselves into thinking that this moment in time is the first moment in which we needed to be having these conversations, right? There has been harm and hurt throughout our communities, and there are ways that we have all failed, no matter how hard we've tried, to be the light. So while I'm deeply appreciative that Jamil raised this as a moment to start this conversation, or to, let's say, to continue this conversation, I don't want to imply in any way that the conversation didn't need to start before. It's not just these instances, not just these incidents that create this moment in time for us. This is the time in which we live. And if we want to change it, we cannot rely on anybody else to make that change. We have to take that into our hands, and we have to make the change. The history of the relationship between the Jewish community and the African American community is, there are multiple narratives, let's put it that way. Those of us in the Jewish community want to attach ourselves to a narrative of Jewish activism in the civil rights era. But let's be very clear that the activists in the civil rights era from the Jewish community were primarily coming from the North. And in the South, by and large, Jews wanted to keep their heads down, and they did not engage in promoting the rights and the needs of their fellow citizens who were in the communities of color, because they were afraid of the risk they were taking upon themselves. I don't say that with any degree of pride, but I think if we're going to have these conversations, we have to be honest about the history, right? We have to be honest about the times when we worked together beautifully. And I think now again about Abraham Joshua Heschel, who in 1963 was invited to speak with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at a conference brought together by the National Conference of Christians and Jews on religion and race. These are his opening remarks. At the first conference on religion and race, the main participants were Pharaoh and Moses. Moses' words were, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may celebrate a feast to me." While Pharaoh retorted, "Who is the Lord, that I should heed this voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go." The outcome of that summit meeting, this is 1963, the outcome of that summit meeting has not come to an end. Would that it had come to an end in 1963. Pharaoh is not ready to capitulate. The Exodus began, but is far from having been completed. In fact, it was easier for the children of Israel to cross the Red Sea than for an African American to cross certain university campuses. Religion and race. How can the two be uttered together? To act in the spirit of religion is to unite what lies apart. To remember that humanity as a whole is God's beloved child. To act in the spirit of race is to sunder, to slash, to dismember the flesh of living humanity. How can we hear the word race and feel no self-reproach? Heschel and King marched together in Selma. There are extraordinary photos of them together, and about that moment, Heschel said, "It felt as if my legs were praying." That's an extraordinary, extraordinary idea, that the activism in which we engage, if we are doing it with the holiest and the most sacred intentions, it is as if we are praying with our physical beings. The words are important, but if we're going to create change, we know it takes so much more than just words. So you have a mixed record within the Jewish community in the civil rights era. You have Heschel and King doing extraordinary things together. And then you have, let's be honest, the experiences in New York and even in Boston of Jewish slumlords setting up situations in which people with lesser means were living in substandard conditions while the Jewish landlords were thriving. We have to live with the reality that both of these things exist. And we need to be extraordinarily humble. I read Heschel's words and my heart is lifted, but I don't want it to go too high because I don't want to delude myself into thinking that that's the whole story, because it's not. But it's a great place for us in the Jewish community to begin to do the work that we need to do. Last thing I'll say is about this journey that Jamil and I have been on, and some extraordinary things that we've shared. One in particular was with a group at Brandeis called Brandeis Bridges. It was initiated by students who wanted to break down the barriers between their communities. And they created, in the first year, a trip to Israel. Half the students in the group were Jewish students, half the students in the group were students from the communities of color, and Jamil and I were the staff. It was one of the greatest gifts my students ever gave to me, mostly because I got to experience that with them, but also because I got to spend some very deep and meaningful time with Jamil, and to try to see the world through someone else's eyes. How much could we make a difference if we all try to see the world through someone else's eyes? That group, Jamil got promoted after that trip. So I went on several more trips without him, which was very much a loss for me because he was very busy. But one of the trips that we went on the following year was a trip to Ghana, which was absolutely extraordinary. 6 months before that, I had been on a trip to Poland with a group of educators, and I had been to Auschwitz for the first time. And I'm not going to try to describe it to you because there really aren't words to describe what that experience is like. It was traumatic and overwhelming, and poignant, and it gripped me. Fast forward 6 months, where I'm traveling with this group of students to Ghana, and we go to the Elmina slave castle. It bothers me that they call them slave castles, right? That's not what you associate. You don't associate castle with the horrors that were committed in these locations. There are several of them. They were the gathering points when folks were being enslaved to a holding place till there was a ship to take them. It was a horror on a level I have never seen before. And I had one student in particular who was on his knees sobbing. And I just stood there with my hand on his shoulder, and I thought, I know what he's feeling, and I don't know what he's feeling, because my heart felt like Auschwitz. And I thought, why does he have to feel this, right? How did we let this happen? And what are we going to do about it so that we can remember without suffering? Because the memory is not without suffering, but how much do we actually have to suffer? If we haven't healed, we have to suffer a lot. But if there's any chance of healing, then we can temper the suffering, and it can become a sad part of who we are, but it doesn't have to govern how we will be. So that's why I'm here. And lots of gratitude to Jamil for all of that. And that's not just my story, but it's kind of the backdrop for the conversation that we'll have today. So I wanted to ask each of you, in October, when you heard about these Instagram posts, I want to know, not what did you think? I want to know, what did you feel? For both of you. What was the experience like for you to see a public figure with a very broad reputation engaged in a visual act of anti-Semitism like that? Whichever one of you wants to begin.
There we go again. That's how I felt. I felt we're doing this again, aren't we? It never stops. It is a constant backdrop. It is not every minute of every day, but it also just never disappears. And it's a heavy feeling. It's a heavy feeling that knowing, okay, we've got to do this. We've got to deal with this. We've got to explain again why this is so awful. and and get support from allies, and just be aware that this is happening. Things are tough. In last year, the number of anti-Semitic reported crimes rose by 35-40%, both nationwide and here in New England. Not as high as it was in 2017, but considering what was happening in 2017, that's hardly a sign of progress. Still higher than it's been before the last couple of years. You like to think that progress gets made. You like to think, hey, we're moving up this way. But in fact, it's more of a spiral. If you're lucky. There's still going to be those times, and so that's really what hit me more than anything else.
As a black male, it was a host of feelings that I had. A whole bunch that I went through, and then I caught myself trying to figure out what's the benefit of that. What is it going to lead to? Where is it going to end? So not end, but what's the end result? What's the outcome of all of this? And while that's happening, I'm seeing just more division. And so my heart is in a place of just trying to unify folks and bring folks together. And so that's when I started changing my thoughts to a different place of how do we take advantage of this moment, of this opportunity to bring folks together, to create understanding, and to acknowledge harm, and at the same time acknowledge the possibility of healing, and to potentially create a space where folks might be able to be together. Because I absolutely believe that we can be in harmony. There's no doubt in my being that we can be in harmony. And I don't know that we hear that enough. And I mean that sincerely. I might not be here when it happens, but I believe it is quite possible. And I see examples of it all the time. We just have to acknowledge those examples, and at the same time, like you open it up with a lot of truth, and you open it up with a lot of vulnerability. And that vulnerability piece is something that a lot of us don't do willingly, and depending on the spaces, it's not always welcome. So, again, bringing it back to your question, there's a host of feelings I had at the beginning, but then I ended in a place where we got to figure out how to get folks together. Because the division piece, we know where that ends. We know where the division piece ends. We've seen that time and time and time again. So,
we're actually we'll spend a little bit more time on the painful origins of this moment, and I really want us to spend most of our time focused on the healing and the growing forward. But I don't want us to brush under the rug the challenges that are bringing us here, and I want us to think for a minute. I want to hear what you folks have to say about the notion of cancel culture. And in that way, I'm talking very specifically about Nike dropping Kanye West from their ads. Kanye West who dropped the ads, right?
No,
Kyrie Irving, sorry.
Well, they both got dropped from companies.
Right, okay, thank you. But Nike dropped Kyrie Irving and Kanye West got dropped by Adidas. Thank you. It's actually not about the two men, it's about the two sports brands that I have no idea which is which.
Right.
Sorry, I've outed myself as having no idea what sports are about. In any event, I'm curious you're thinking about, is that cancel culture, was it right to take those those podia, if you will, away from them? Or is that an example of the way in which we are failing to engage in difficult and constructive dialogue?
For me, when that question, like the nature of the question, it just puts you in a place of not necessarily as division, but it makes you, because immediately I could immediately see the equity that's not present, because there's so many other folks that have violated other people connected to these companies, and the outcome was nowhere near the same. And again, that's part of that. I was in that train of thought, and I was like, how do we get, not forget about it, but how do we address it, but address it by being together, and then still have an accountability piece there. So that's where my thoughts went with that, because there's so many. And then along with that was the, folks call it groupthink, but there was this network that just continued to unfold, and more folks continued to add on to, I don't know if this was punishment or public, you're getting judged by the public, so I don't know what you want to call it, but more and more folks just kept adding on to it, and it just seemed, it was only adding more harm and adding more pain. And it's like someone a long time ago said, it's like pouring water on a drowning man kind of thing. It's like, come on, like why what's the end result? Again, what's the end result of this? And then again, it's easy, not easy, but immediately, again, as a black man, I was going to the place of, well, what about when this person did it, and that person did it, and this group did it, and that group did it, and then that list is vast. And so there has to be another way to get at this, and I think love is a way to do that. And then when I say love, I don't mean it in, love is not weak. It's not this thing that is passive. It's the thing that oftentimes makes it possible for one to do that which is most complicated and most complex, and requires strength and discipline and commitment. And so how do we let that love present itself so that it can bring us together? I'll pause because I'll go on and on. Go ahead, Tom.
Part of my concerns with all this start with the fact that Kanye had more followers on Twitter than there are Jews in the world. And so, it's scary. We're scared. And, and so when Kanye gets invited, or Ye gets invited to the White House, to the former White House, and when these kinds of comments that once have been regarded as fringe and unacceptable, and not, there are people saying that stuff, but we in the center of America don't believe this. And when you see that happening, it scares you even more. So, when that happens, I my level of sympathy for losses that he's suffered tend not to be that big. At the same time, I don't really want to turn over to big companies how I'm feeling about things. I don't want to make the decision of what Nike or Adidas is doing can't be how it can't be how I want to live my life. That if their decision goes my way, I'm happy, and if their decision goes against me, I'm sad. I don't want to give them that kind of power. It doesn't feel right. I think that the power has to come from us, from people making decisions, from, it's supposed to be a democracy, not something that's run by money. It may not be true, but it's what I want to believe in, and what I think I've got to keep fighting for.
And I think that part of the implication is this nature of the system is going to be that it is governed by those kind of business influences, but we don't have to be. And we can, sometimes the best way to make change is to bypass the stumbling blocks, not to try to climb over them. And I don't have a good answer, right? Please. That's great. No, that's wonderful.
I was just going to say, I like to think of it as the opposite, Tom, and think that, these larger corporations are seeing that we do have the power of where we spend our money. And so they're trying to make decisions I can't speak to their motives, but they're hopefully trying to make decisions to appease the people that, you know, they're looking to buy their product, right? So if I am someone that's being passive and allowing certain people or groups to say certain things, and, you know, America is taking notice of that, and they're going to skip over Nike and go to Adidas, or skip over Adidas and go to Puma, that is also driving, you know, the decision making in those boardrooms. So I think, you know, some say it's cancel culture, but I think we're also at a place where we need people that are running corporations and, you know, our country and making decisions on our behalf to be speaking for us and to be acting on our behalf.
It's about wresting the power back. Yeah.
So the thing I would add on to this conversation, and we see you, is, you know, the cancel culture thing. Folks now kind of try to say counsel instead of cancel kind of thing. Because what does this mean when you say, you know, you done? We finished with you. We done with you kind of deal. Again, we know what that does. We know where that leads. And that's not what we should be about. I'm not saying forget what folks did and not to have levels of accountability. But again, where's the recourse? Where's the transformation? Where's the restoration? You know what I mean? Those pieces to the conversation in life kind of deal. You know, and social media plays this role in it, but you know, it's the gift and the curse.
That's right.
But again, we talking about harmony and voices together. You know what I mean? This is what we're trying to get at that, and we do that again, being honest and truthful with each other. This journey that Elise was talking about, that she and I went with Black and Jewish students and folks, well, some are multiracial as well. We had some very intense conversations after every day at every spot that we went to. And one of the stark differences, I was so disappointed that I wasn't able to go to Ghana with Elise and the students, because something else that we had, this is a whole nother thing, that when we went to Israel, like some folks, it wasn't necessarily a first time going there or being familiar with it, and so there was a familiarity with it, but there was some first time experiences with the whole group. But when folks went to West Africa, folks went to Ghana, that was the first time for folks being in that space. So when you hear about the student on his knees, just bring it down, I don't know that wouldn't have been myself in that same situation, having that moment. So you're having these real life moments at that point in time. But to have that just gives another level of understanding and another level of I want to say appreciation, but it's just more than that. Humility of building bridges. I mean, it's called, the name of the program is called Bridges. So it's about actually bringing, it really is bridging understanding and bringing folks together. Like so the whole point of it was to have cultures go to each other's origins in many respects. And that's what was happening when you go there, and you're just like, wow. While I'm in Israel, my grandmother on my wife's side dies, and I'm at the prayer wall and putting a prayer for my grandmother in the wall, and my wife calls me, she lets me know, and I'm there when that happens. So these are life things that, you know, impact what we're talking about here today. You know what I mean? So this thing, I mean, I agree with you, like sneakers, apparel and clothes and all that. I mean, I'm with all that. I can't. I'm a sucker for clothes and all that. But at the end of the day, it's not so much what they represent, more so than what's happening, what's being done, and done in a public forum. And so now we're seeing it. And so then you get to that place, like Tom was saying, here it goes again, kind of deal. But how do we move beyond that? Here we go again. You know. So sorry. Yeah.
It's okay. So. A lot to unravel with everything that you've said. So a lot of things are buzzing around in my head. So as an educator, for me, it comes back to teaching, and we know the work is hard. We know the conversations are extraordinarily difficult, and I think what's made it more difficult in education right now to teach about these big topics, whether it's the Holocaust, slavery, whatever it may be. We see what's happening in the public right now with public education. We have people pushing back even on us, like oh, the woke culture and CRT and all this real garbage. I mean,
Yep.
until I'll be honest with everybody, I've been a public educator here in Franklin for 27 years, and when I first started hearing all this stuff about CRT, I'm like, I had never heard of CRT. And so the point I'm trying to make is that, like, our kids need these conversations. I feel like it's the only way out of the abyss. And we have to, history is history. And even with that being
Yep.
said, we have tremendous questions being pushed back at us as educators about, well, what is history? And that's another topic for another time. But I do think our way out of this abyss is through education and conversations with students. Think about what they're going through. They are being bombarded with information. Many of them, and I witness it every day, many of them really struggle with navigating their way through all that information.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Kanye, I talked to students about Kanye West when that event happened, and some of them had, some comments I heard was, I really like his music. And okay, so, which maybe goes back to Kansas, so here I am as a grown man, I'm like, man, I had this conversation, because I'm like, there are athletes and entertainers who have done things that I don't agree with, and I struggle with following them, listening to their music. I struggle with that, and if you want to call that cancel culture, I would not call that cancel culture. I would call that more personal decisions that we have to make. Same thing with corporate America. So how do we? I think that's one of the big questions. How do we help our kids get through that, get out of the abyss? Because they're in the abyss with everybody else.
So, from a little Jewish historical perspective of some of this, let's go back a while. Richard Wagner, one of the great, revolutionary, brilliant composers of all time, also a vicious anti-Semite, wrote vicious anti-Semitic texts, was venerated by the Nazis. Music was played in the death camps. Jewish communities don't play Wagner's music at Jewish settings. The Israeli Philharmonic finally has said, enough time has passed, we're willing to play it in symphonies. But does that make it cancel culture for me to say, we do a Jewish wedding, I'm not playing, you can't play Wagner, I can't deal with it, we can't deal with it? I don't think so. I think it is I think that it is a complicated conversation all the way through, and there isn't necessarily a single right answer for this. It requires understanding and sensitivity as to why people can feel that way about different things.
I think it also requires an ability to live in that very difficult place of multiple narratives. And that's something that I saw on that trip with the Bridges students to Israel in a way I had thought about the idea but didn't really feel myself inside. What does it mean to live with multiple and sometimes competing narratives, and to be able to take the leap of faith that it takes to say, this is true and this is true.
Right.
Because as soon as we start to say either we've got competing tragic sagas, what's the benefit in competing, right? That's please redirect that energy, because nobody wins when you compete about whose life experience is more tragic. But what do we do about taking all of that hurt and building something together? Where can we take that? And I think that, it's, if we were going to be here for 3 days, I would want to spend actually significantly more time in this space of lifting up the suffering, to shed the light on it, because what do they say? Sunlight is the best disinfectant. But I also want us to have time to not leave here only dragged down by what we know to be wrong, but to also begin thinking about where we go with all of this. And as I say that, the one last thing I have to say, and I'm not even sure we can entertain this question, because I don't know where we go with it, but you talked about Kanye West at the former White House, and I was thinking about, I don't know, last week, was it? When the former president hosted Kanye West and Nick Fuentes for dinner?
Yes.
Did that happen? Like, do we really live in a world where that happens?
Yeah.
And, yeah, we do. And what are we going to do with that, right? You're going to choose to vote however you're going to choose to vote, in a way that is responsive to some degree to that, for sure. But you know what? I used to think, if we can get people to vote, we can change the world. I'm kind of not so convinced anymore that getting people to vote is going to change the world, because the world keeps spiraling out of control, and our votes are not enough of an anchor. So the question is, what else are we going to do? So I had to get that part off my chest about Nick Fuentes. If you're not familiar, Nick Fuentes is a noted, I don't know if you use that, notorious might be a better term, white supremacist, Holocaust denier, and the former president said, I didn't know.
Yeah. I didn't know he was coming.
Oh, that I didn't hear. I heard I didn't know what he stood for.
It was both.
Favor by taking the meeting in Kanye.
Got it. Thank you.
I was going to say, I think that I'm not trying to fix the whole world. That's I think a little beyond our abilities, and I don't think any one thing fixes the world. But what we can do is fix the corner that we have conversations in, so that we can start to have greater understanding. That I can hear, from you, Jamil, about the things that cause you pain. You can hear about the things that cause me pain, and we talk about them back and forth and understand each other, and that goes for everybody else here too, so that it isn't just will that fix the problem that the potential next nominee of a major political party was perfectly happy having dinner with someone who explicitly attacks Jews? The Jews should not be in any major positions, and for that matter, the has support for any number of expressly racist positions. Is that going to fix that? No, it's not. But it's going to do something for us, and that's not nothing.
There are, because I know we run out of time. Friends and family, there are mad examples of black folks and Jewish folks doing stuff together in the most tumultuous of times. A simple Google search, if you just put that in, times when black and Jewish folks have worked together, you're going to get a list of historical occasions where it happened. All of them are not pretty, but folks were together. And so what I'm saying by offering that, to your point, not leaving on a note of negativity, there is It exists. This is not new. We're not trying to, create something that has not existed before. Mm-hmm. This again, we know what happens when we do the things separate and when we compare and contrast. We know that. But when we honest with each other and we move forward with each other and we do some things, that allows us to be in a different space. It allows us to move differently. I don't know if that would allow folks I don't know what that dinner was about with those folks. All I know, they could have changed some heads and hearts in that dinner. I don't know. But we know social media will allow it to have a narrative that will force folks, not force, but in some ways, folks will just choose this side or that side. Nah, I can't believe they did that. Well, yeah, of course they did that. And then there goes the argument. And so now we're on opposing sides kind of things. Nobody's in that conversation. Nobody knows what's up and what happened there. I say this often. One of the most powerful things that happened in the past, I don't know if folks remember Don Imus back in the days. He, Shock Jock Cat, he had said something real horrible about the Rutgers University women's basketball team. One of the most powerful things that happened out of that was that there was a meeting that took place between him and that team. Nobody knows what happened inside of that meeting. I know some folks who were there because I was working in Jersey at the time, but it was powerful. And something that you would never imagine would happen happened. And there was like no coverage of that. What happened? It probably was something that could have, because that's an example. That's an example of something horrific and horrible, still allowing folks to come in the same space and having a conversation, not a confrontation. And that's what we're talking about, having conversations, not confrontation. And then we also talking about folks moving together. We're talking about voices, in harmony. It takes effort and work to make that happen. Commitment. We could do that. Absolutely. That can happen.
Can I pose a question?
Mm-hmm.
Especially about Fuentes and West down in Florida. I see these events, when that happened, my initial reaction was, here we go again. And like, oh my God, like what are these people thinking? And then I wonder, my extreme question is this their way of saying, we ourselves are not going to be marginalized? We have our thoughts, and as horrible as, and they are horrible thoughts. I mean, I'm not even debating that. But I almost look at it as a form of bullying as well. Like, we're going to get ourselves out there, and the heck with everybody else, and we're drawing a line in the sand, and I think there is an element of that, and because I think Charlottesville back in 2016. My God, for me, that was a real inflection point in our country, a recent one, and that event brought so many people out from the racist shadows and the anti-Semitic shadows that we haven't even recovered from that yet. And in a way, that's given permission, in my opinion, it's given permission to all these other people to come out and say, oh, okay. And I think it's horrific, and it's really dangerous, and our country is in a really, really dangerous spot right now with all of that, obviously. I mean, not saying anything else.
Look, that anti-Jewish and anti-black sentiments by the folks who are trying to make those big out there are designed to split two communities that have at least some connection and some as a way of defeating both of them. And part of our job, to me, is not to let that happen. We've got to, that we have to find ways to keep talking to each other and be together, because otherwise it just plays into the hands of those who would harm both of us.
So I think I was just gonna, in response to where you were going with, is that the platform that they're sort of building up to strike back, right? I think if we look historically at how these sort of hateful, bigoted, fascist movements have succeeded, it has always been through finding a way to other people, right? So this is their way of othering, right? Because they are othering the bulk of America against the coastal elites and the intellectuals and the haves, and setting themselves up, even though by no means do they resemble that demographic, as the common Joe, the person I can go have a beer with,
Right.
you know, and so they are painting themselves into that corner very artificially, and so, and that is the way, you know, Hitler during that time, it was socioeconomic means that were used as divisive forces or as othering forces. And right now, it's almost a war on intellectualism, right? We are afraid of knowledge in this country right now, which is the biggest mistake we are making. My husband is from Germany, and, you know, he tells me since elementary school, children learn about the Holocaust. Children learn about the role that their fellow countrymen played in what, and it's not, they don't die, they don't shrivel up, they don't become disturbed human beings. They grow up with knowledge, and they grow up for the most part, even though now again in Germany there is a, you know, uprising again of certain right-wing kind of elements, but for the most part, people grow up knowledgeable, right? In America, I fear we don't have the courage. Like, we always want to look at the rosy side of things. We always want to look at the beautiful side of things. We don't realize that humanity is made up of black and white and gray spaces, and ugly and beautiful and everything that's in between. And, you know, sort of what you were saying about suffering and sorrow and not wanting that person, that students to have that experience. I think that is a part of our humanity. If we don't feel that suffering, right? Even if it's not for ourselves, if it's for our neighbor or whoever, I think we cannot be fully human without that. Just as love and joy are one side of what makes us human, then there is this darkness and this suffering that we must also not turn our faces away from. Otherwise, we will do again what needs to never be done.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to do when talking about moving forward, one thing I would like to do is have opportunities for serious learning about what anti-Semitism is and how it works and why it is different from other types of hatred and why it's similar, what racism is, how it works, and have that not as two separate conversations, but have them, you know, one leading into another and going back and forth and having those understandings. You know, I think it's amazing the things we think we know that we may not know.
So when we first had this idea about tonight, part of it included maybe this is the first in a series, because it's so much more to the conversation that we just haven't touched on. And it's not because it's not important, but it's just because we just got a limited amount of time, and we'll use the time that we have. You know what I mean? So there's just, but so much we can have in this one conversation right now this evening. You know, the conversation piece tonight is an example of it. Just getting folks together. It would be a mistake to believe that everyone in here feels the same way. That would be a mistake. Earlier this evening, before we even got started, before the camera started rolling and stuff like that, and we started taking notes for the article and whatnot, we had conversation with people, with each other. Asked folks to talk about what you hear this evening. Then we took it a step further and spoke up and asked folks to take their phones out, take some pictures with each other. Folks did all that without asking for your label, without asking for what you identify with and all that. Folks did it. We moved together. Now, there's some things we may find out about each other that we may disagree with. But we had this other experience before then, which should make it possible for us to be like, okay, well, that's something we disagree on. Maybe we can, still continue to talk about that in some way, shape, or form, and see where that goes. But this is just an example of folks, without finding out labels and identities and things like that, that we can do things together to move onward. I don't know if it's always forward, but sometimes it's onward before you go forward. You know what I mean? And there's a lot more that we can do. Folks absolutely had every reason to not come tonight. It was Sunday, it's snowing, and you had to walk up the hill to get up here. It's just really, any number of reasons, but folks still came out for any number of reasons. It takes some level of commitment to make that happen this evening. You know what I mean? So, folks, we could do this. It is not impossible. It is not impossible.
We know it's not impossible because we just came off of 3 years of doing the impossible.
That's right. That's right.
Some of us got together with people every day, every week, and you saw these examples of communities doing these sorts of things. So I would say if there is a series, it has to be weekly. If there's a series, it's got to be every day. I do think our lives depend on this. I do think, too, that we are going to have to do something for our children because I don't think this country's hit rock bottom yet. Donald Trump entering into the presidential race is going to bring us down. And it's not, I'm with you, Rabbi, it's not about the voting. We are about to get into a fight like we've never been in before. And we're going to have to own our intellects. We're going to have to own it. And we are going to have to confront. And we're going to have to do those things. So I implore us, if we do anything, let's get back to those weekly gatherings. Let's get back to those daily check-ins. And, we need a different kind of vaccination right now. And we know that we can do this. We just have. And we know we've done it over time because we're still here.
Like Brian Stevenson says, we haven't dealt with our racist past. And we don't have a full knowledge of history because our history books are written by the daughters of the Confederacy.
That essential need to find and nourish common ground, even when the common ground is you're hurting, I'm hurting, right? But if we start from a place of nourishing that common ground, then two things can happen. We inoculate. I thought it was a great choice of metaphor. We inoculate ourselves against the next thing coming, which we know is going to come, but we're going to be so much stronger together if we're already together. The coalitions that we build that are reactive are never as strong as the coalitions that we build that are proactive. So the first thing will happen is we'll be inoculated together against whatever the next one is going to be. And then the next stage of it is going to be, it'll be a longer time until the next one after that, because we build it consecutively and we build it together. You did a great job of getting to my number 7 question. And I see that you have a hand, and I'm not going to ignore you, but I'm conscious of our time, and we're going to continue conversation. I'll save some of the questions, like what are we going to do about social media, for another time. But go ahead, and then I think we'll time to wrap us up together, please.
Actually, my comment ties into social media a little bit, but I agree completely that we're not just doing this for ourselves and our children, but I think we have to include children in the process, and that's really important, and that's something that teachers do and can do more of. So I think that in our society, we isolate ourselves, I'm not the first person to say this, with people who think like we do. And so it's really hard to find access to people who think differently and feel differently. So this is really important, and it's important to provide more opportunities for kids and teenagers to have these kinds of just contact with people who are different from themselves. And I have this one naive thought about social media and all the challenges that you see on social media that kids are doing, all the way up to college students. So I would love to see someone bring a challenge to kids to find someone who thinks differently or looks differently from them and have a 20-minute conversation. You know, that kind of challenge. If that went viral, it would be great. I know it's kind of naive, but
It's not naive, but it comes back to another thought that's in my mind sitting here. It's that fear. All of us are fearful of something, right? And you know, we could argue that a wide array of people in our country are fearful of the change that's occurring in this country. Racist, religious, whatever it might be. Not racist, I'm sorry.
Racial.
Racial, thank you, I'm sorry. But change is happening, and people are fearful of that. But then there are people who welcome that, and in turn, they're feared of. So like it's multi-layered in my mind, and kids are somewhat very protective of themselves in regard to, I don't want to let too much out of the bag. I mean, they're kids. I mean, I work with middle school kids. Middle school kids are notorious, in a good way, for being very self-centered. It's all about them, and that's just. I mean, we were all that. We were all like that at that age. So, I think it's a great idea, and we should be doing more of that with kids. I totally agree with that. But again, that's going to take helping kids to navigate them and do that. And I'm just thinking that as a teacher that if we're going to do that, expect pushback and be prepared for that.
From the parents.
Yeah, from everybody, really, from parents, colleagues, I mean, everything. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. If anything, it means we should. If you're getting pushback, that means wow, we're onto something.
I don't know if you're familiar with an organization called Better Angels, but this is Braver Angels now. It was an organization that was created specifically to set up these kinds of conversations, to put people who have radically different thoughts about the world in conversation with one another. Because what happens when you have a conversation with a person? This is one of my complaints about social media is about you're not. It's not a person. It's a screen, and you can lose any sense of humanity because it's not really a person. Well, put you in front of that same person. Now, part of the problem is that social media has eroded our sensitivity to a degree that it's actually become a lot easier for people to actually say it to another human being's face. But spend more time with people face to face, breaking bread together and being comfortable to disagree. Those are extraordinary, tiny steps that we could take to make change, and that we have to.
Gregory Ellison is someone who's also doing this wonderful work similar to this. He called it fear-less dialogue. So he says you're going to have the fear. It's not a fearless dialogue, it's fear-less. And he's pulling these people from really interesting walks of life together in spaces. I mention that just because it's one of those things I'm trying to pull some reading groups together to maybe try and duplicate that.
So one thing I'll add on to this is I believe people want to be together.
Oh, totally.
I believe more people want to be together than not. I believe people want to have the conversations. But where sometimes the fear, the uncertainty, the questionable engagement of it comes from is not knowing how to engage in that conversation and how not to feel set up, bullied, ambushed in that conversation. How to have it equitable from the setup. And so there are ways, and I imagine that the Angels group does this, and I know that there are a number of us, including myself, that do workshops on how to engage in complex conversations so that folks they have a pathway, and I say pathway, not a formula, of how a conversation could happen that is not going to get. It's not going to. There's no time limit on it, but this is how it could happen. And so maybe that's another thing we can do. Is allowing folks to be able to engage in those complex conversations. And I say complex versus difficult because sometimes folks say difficult and make that analogous with impossible. Folks say complex and put that together with, well, it's going to take a little bit of work sometimes. And so we absolutely can do that if folks have that. I've seen that work time and time and time again. And when I say work, I mean meaning folks having conversations, not confrontation. So, and there's a couple hands, but you gotta wrap this up
at some point here.
Some point.
Should we sing?
Right. Well, are we not doing the hands? No?
You made it sound like we weren't doing the hands. Hands, please.
Then we'll sing.
Then we'll sing.
What if I acquire understanding and sympathy, and I understand where someone is coming from, and someone else also understands me, and he or she will still not change actions? What am I supposed to do? This is part of it. We are told that we cannot change other people's behavior from all the self-help books, which obviously I need. But all we can change is the way we react. How do we change the way we react when we are dealing with someone who, again, may understand where we're coming from, but have no intention of changing his or her action?
So he, she, they, them. I don't know that the objective is to go and I never go into a conversation believe I'm going to change somebody.
Right.
That's me personally. That's just not what I'm going into it for. The conversation is for us to converse, see what's up, maybe learn some things about each other, and have another level of understanding each other. And that may just be it. But what may happen is that now, the next time you see each other, you have more conversation, and deeper conversation, and that may lead to some other moment of enlightenment on either side.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's always about trying to change people. You know what I mean? Because folks, oftentimes folks change for themselves, not for other people. You know what I mean?
I grew up in a part of the country where the people tend to think very differently from the way I thought. And I was engaged in those kinds of things. And so many of my friends were people who I just thought were leading us down a terrible road, but they were still my friends, and you could still manage it. I miss that.
I still don't want to be friends with neighbors who are flying the don't tread on me.
I know.
Sorry, what do they do?
They're flying the don't tread on me flag.
But I also think that, yes, we can't go into these conversations expecting change. And I think that if you really are achieving a level of understanding with someone, it's not going to be the same as it was before that. That's just because how human beings are with one another. You may not still agree, right? You may still hold diametrically different opinions. But how you interact with one another is, if sincerely you really do understand one another, it's transformed, and it lays the groundwork for possibilities of all kinds in the future. But it's not about it's about going in there in the pursuit of that understanding and trying to find each other's humanity, and then you see where that takes you. But I feel like, and maybe this is a terrible degree of optimism on my part, but I feel like if you're really able to engage with someone on that level, it can't stay the same. I just think it can't. Was there another hand? I see.
1, 2. Any others? 1, 2, and that's it.
3.
1, 2, 3, and that's it.
Three hands, and we sing.
Was that one?
You are one.
Okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say, my comment was similar to Rosemary's, where, and I can speak, I think, at least for me and Amna, we run Mega Marches in Medway, so it's been 3 years now, and I think the biggest thing no one tells you when you become an activist is like the emotional toll you take on having those conversations, right? We've had a number of conversations with people who have pretty much shown they're not going to change their mind, at least anytime soon that we can see. And we've been the target of, several online attacks and personal attacks as well. And so we have had to figure out, like, where do we draw that line? Who do we let go and don't engage with versus who's kind of in that middle area that we might be able to, find some common ground and at least plant that seed. So for me, it is tough because there are some people that I have had to cut out and say, like, I don't want to be associated with you. You're clearly very on the opposite side of my beliefs and where I want to be associated with. I don't want other people to think that I'm believing certain things either. And so it has been tough to figure out, where that line is and how much love and dialogue can change certain situations.
Evan?
Well, I was hoping to go back to, I wanted to go a little bit back into the cancel culture discussion where, it terrifies me, cancel culture, is that, I'm always afraid of, something that I say that's opinionated is, going to get canceled, is going to cancel me. Basically, I don't want, it's not like I mean to say anything offensive, but it doesn't matter to people who feel offended by it. So, when people say they're canceled and they say they're wrong, they admit they're wrong, and they apologize forward, they step up and apologize. How do we go to forgive them with cancel culture in the mindset? How do we trust that they're not going to say things like that again, or how they're going to change or something? I'd like to know how to.
That's a good long conversation.
I'll go back to saying that kind of leaping over it for a moment is the recognition that if we build relationships, then we can share differing opinions. That doesn't solve the first level that you're talking about, things that already are in place, right? But we have to be thinking about both, right? We have to be thinking about long term and the short term and the immediate. Because long term, if we can establish the kinds of relationships that are really sincere and honest and true with people, then then already when they say they don't like your opinion, then the first moment is not to cancel, but to ask you more and to try to learn more. But that's a few steps ahead, right? In the immediate moment, I think that I agree with Tom. It's a much deeper conversation, and I think that there are times where people repent, and we don't know if we can trust that repentance, right? I think that that's a real thing.
Okay, just real quick to kind of tag on to that is there's a country artist that a couple of years ago there was a couple things that he said that were not exactly accepted by the current society, and I'm starting to hear more from him again at this point where it sounds like he's done the work for himself to be a better person and present a better front. And in fact, one of his current songs out right now is talking about, Mama, don't, I forget the exact words, but it's something about, don't give up on me. All that praying you did seems to have taken hold now. And it's one of those, maybe this is the way he's coming back into society, and society can't accept him.
Absolutely a deeper conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Alan?
A very, very short point to some of the earlier comments. We use the word them as little as possible. All
Very nice.
individuals, we have to kind of group each other in some ways, but when we do that, that's a dangerous thing because we stop treating as individuals. So easier said than done.
Oh, and I think it's really critical. It's critical to this conversation, and we kind of started there by saying that you can't paint with a broad brush. That it's each individual has to be seen for who they are, sometimes because of something good and sometimes because of something bad, but you have to be able to see that person as themselves and not as representative of something larger.
I'm not, again, working with 8th graders, they see themselves as them. And so I don't disagree with your point, but they, I don't know how else to explain it. They see themselves as them.
Are you referring?
They see themselves as regardless of their race, ethnicity, religion, they also see themselves as being marginalized. And to then try to teach them just your point about using that word in the broad strokes. I hear it from them but I'm them. I'm the one. I'm there.
I hear that, and I think that's a really important distinction between the degree to which we other people, and how you address that is different from how you address people feeling othered. I don't want to deny that somebody feels othered, but I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything that is othering them.
Yeah.
Now we sing.
Now you sing.
Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.